Yeah. Okay, good evening. Today, Mirza Hashem, we're going to be finishing Maseches Zevachim. We actually have quite a bit of ground to cover because I totally messed up and meant to learn more last night. And when I came back to my Gemara, I'm like, why didn't I continue last night? So we're going to pay the price for that now. We're on the bottom of Kufiyat Testament Aleph at the two dots Tanu Rabbanan, and we are going to move quickly to get us to the end of the Masechta. Keep up with me, okay? Here we go. Tanu Rabbanan, the two dots, 2/3 of the way down in Kufiyat Testament Aleph, says the pasuk based on Bo Yerushalayim, when they got to Yerushalayim. So then Bamos were then Asura. So Tanu Rabbanan, the pasuk says Ki lo vasem ad ata el hamenucha vel hanachala. What does the word menucha mean? What does the word nachala mean? That's going to be our first conversation for the day. 4 different shitas. First is menucha zu Shiloh. Menucha was Shiloh. First, the Jews got to Shiloh, and as we spoke about, they were there for 369 years. And then nachala zu Yerushalayim. Nachala. Okay, they went to Yerushalayim, and then they finally built the Beis HaMikdash. Ve'omer, how do I know that Nachala is a reference to Yerushalayim? Because one pasuk says, Hayasali Nachalasi Ka'arye Bayar. Nachalasi is the word we're picking up there. The next pasuk says, Ve'omer Ha'ayit Savua Nachalasi Li Ha'ayit Savivla. This pasuk is referencing Yerushalayim. So we see that Nachala is talking about Yerushalayim. So therefore, Menucha is Shiloh, Nachala is Yerushalayim, and the Marim Makomos work out. And that is Divrei Reb Yehuda, but Reb Shimon doesn't agree. Reb Shimon says, Omer, no, Menucha, remember the pasuk is El HaMenucha Vel HaNachal. He says the first word Menucha is Yerushalayim. And Nachal is Ushilo, so they're out of order. Why would we say that Menucha belongs to Yerushalayim? Why did Reb Shimon hold the opposite way? But Omer, the reason he says this is because Zos Menuchasi Ade Ad Poashiv Ki Visiha. And the next pasuk says, Omer Ki Bachar Hashem Bitzion Ivalamoshavlo. So the second pasuk says Bitzion, referencing Yerushalayim, and the previous pasuk is talking about Menuchasi. So we see the word Menucha is a reference to Yerushalayim. So Machlokas. Says the Gemara, I only understand one of these shitas. I understand if you say menucha zu Shiloh hainu dichsiv ela menucha ela nachala. I understand, says the Gemara, they're in historical order. Ela menucha is Shiloh, 369 years. Ela nachala is Yerushalayim. After that, they built it, the pasuk in the right order. But Ela, if you want to say lamandam menucha zu Yerushalayim, if you want to say that that menucha, which is the first reference in the pasuk, ela menucha ela nachala, if menucha is Yerushalayim and nachala is Shiloh, you're out of order. The pasuk is not right. Then, if that's the case, then El Hanachal Vel Menucha Mibayle. You should have had the pasuk the other direction. It says the Gemara, you're right. And this is a little bit vague because we really need to see Rishonim here, which we're not going to do. It says the Gemara, really hachikama. Lo mibaya. I don't need you to tell me that Menucha de lo matisu, that you didn't get to Yerushalayim. That we know already because you're still in Gilgal at this point. But Ela afilu lenachala nami lo matisu. You didn't even get to You didn't even get to Shiloh yet. So we don't know the implications of all of this, but that is what the Gemara says is the definition of the pasuk according to Reb Shimon. All that is approach number 1 and number 2. Ela menucha vel nachala. Shita number 1 is menucha is Shiloh, nachala is Yerushalayim, and then the second shita of Reb Shimon is flipped. Here's another shita. Reb Shimon ben Yochai, who we will soon see will be the victor of this conversation. Omer zu v'zu Yerushalayim. We're not talking about Shiloh. Ela menucha vel nachala is talking about Yerushalayim. She says the Gemara, well, I don't understand that either. I could understand the first 2 versions of the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, as we explained on the previous page. That makes sense. Again, either according to the Rabbi Yehuda version, that it's in sequential order, or according to the Rabbi Shimon version, that it's a lo mibaya. That makes sense. According to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochanan, what was Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai? According to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, who says that Shiloh, Yerushalayim, menucha nachala mibayda. The pasuk, if it's all talking about the same place, it shouldn't say el menucha ve'el nachala. It's the same place. If you're saying that zu v'zu is Yerushalayim or zu v'zu is going to be Shiloh, then why? Then the pasuk is wrong. Says the Gemara, kasha. Very good point. Okay, then the Gemara digs still deeper. 4 lines down on Kufiyat Testament base. Shiloh. That I can even understand. I'll let you say that. Both are talking about Shiloh. Menucha de nachumi kibush. We use the word language of menucha to teach us that they rested from kibush that happened in Shiloh. And nachalas de palgu hasam nachalos. They apportioned the lands of Eretz Yisrael. That I can understand. Fine. We can understand that's a one way to understand the zuvazu that they're both talking about. Shiloh. Ella l'madam zuvazu Yerushalayim. Bishlama nachala, the word nachala refers to Eretz Yisrael because nachalas olamim. It's the permanent place where we're going to have the Beis HaMikdash. El menucha, my menucha. Why then would you say that the word menucha applies there? Again, I'll grant you, we can say the word nachala fits. Why the word menucha? So the Gemara doesn't give the answer we gave from the previous page. Different Tana. What does this Tana say? Menuchas aron. We're talking about where the Aron rests. Where do we typically keep the Aron? Please God, soon in the base of Mikdash, in the Kodesh HaKodashim, Dichsiv, Vahi Kenoach HaAron. And the Noach and the Aron was resting. Says Rashi, top line, I love these Rashis. Rashi says, Vahi Kenoach Aron Chipastiv Velo Mitzasiv. That sounds similar. Kuma Hashem Elokim Lanochacha Atav Aron Uzecha. Unbelievable. Tosfos argues on the side. Aron. Rashi. Tosfos say Pirush Rashi pasuk b'divrei v'chule. Fine, whatever. Either way, this is not a pasuk in Tanakh. So what was the Gemara doing? Not for now, but a great question. So it says the Gemara. That's why the word menucha could also be a reference to Yerushalayim. Then the Gemara says, I can even understand that shita where both words are menucha and nachala refer to Yerushalayim. Aval Shilo habasharia bamos. I could understand if what you're saying is Ela menucha v'ela nachala talks about Yerushalayim, and only then, when Yerushalayim was built, were bamos asuros. Aval earlier in Shiloh habasharia bamos. That makes sense because during that period of time, he was the father of Shimshon. When he found out al derech nevuah that he was going to have a child who was going to be a leader of Klal Yisrael, he brought korbanos on a bama. So if you say El Menucha V'El Nachala is talking about Yerushalayim, Zubazu, both of them, both languages are talking about Yerushalayim, and prior to that time, Bamos are Motor, that explains what happened in Sefer Shoftim. That makes perfect sense. That Manoach would bring a korban. Elolamanda Omar Zuvizu Shila Ubamos Hava Asuran. But if you say that the pasuk El Menucha V'El Nachala is talking about Shiloh, then how in the world could he have brought a korban? Bamos would have been Asuros. Mai Vayikach Manoach. So the Gemara says that's not a very good question because it could be that for Manoach Horas Shah Haisa, that there was a Horas Shah, that the Malach who informed him that this was that Shimshon was going to be his son and therefore he brought the korban. That's a Horas Shah that he was given a heter to bring a korban. Let's close out this sugya of what the words Nachala and Menucha refer to. Tanad Be Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, the Amar Zuv Yerushalayim, V'Simanech Mashchei Gavra LeGavre. Everybody holds that El Menucha V'El Nachal is talking about Yerushalayim for the reasons that we gave above. And V'Simanech Mashchei Gavra LeGavre. The way you can remember is that one person, a Gavra, which is singular, was Mashach. He drew in Gavre, all the other people, namely Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai was the Gavra. He said his shita, and he drew everybody else with him. And that is how we conclude. The pasuk of El Menucha V'El Nachal is like Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. End of that first piece of Gemara. That brings us to the two dots on Kuf Yud Tes Amud Beis, which was where we were supposed to finish last night, and we did. Says the Gemara, Kol HaKodshim. This was going back to our Mishnah. This is very. You have to look back in the Mishnah, but we're not going to do that now. I'll just do it for you. That what is this halacha talking about Kol HaKodshim? If an animal was dedicated at the time of Heter Bamos. Right, so let's say in the time of Heter Bamos before Shiloh, I dedicate an animal. And then at a later time when there's an Isser Bamos, I bring the animal. So the halacha is no kares. Says the Gemara, let's qualify this. Amar Rav Kahana, lo shanu that there's no kares el b'shchita. But if you take that animal and you bring it somewhere where you shouldn't, aval b'ha'ala'a, if you take it somewhere else, kares nami mechayev. You would be chayev kares. You're just not chayev for the shchita because it initially started at a time of Heter Bamos. That's fine. But the ha'ala'a, if you are now in that holier place and then you bring it out, you will talk be chayiv kares. A diuk from the Gemara. My time. But why would you say you're chayiv here? The Amar Kra, and it's a play on words. Va'alehem tomar, and we assume va'alehem is al hasmuchin, talking about what was previously in the pasuk va'alehem with an ayin on that which we said before, which was about korban. It's a play on words, and therefore al hasmuchin tomar. So we're going to say it's on the previous pasuk, and therefore it's talking about taking something out of the Makom HaMikdash, and therefore you're going to be chayiv. Says the Gemara, I'm sorry. Last I checked, an aleph and an ayin are not the same letters. Maskif lo rabba, miksiv ve'alehim tomar, alehim with an aleph ksiv. Therefore, not a good argument. And furthermore, Tanya, we have a brisa. This brisa has 4 points, one of which will disagree with Rav Kahana, and then we will end the second sugi of the day. Let's see the 4 points that the brisa says. We're halfway down, almost halfway down on Kuf Yud Tes Amud Beis. Arba klalos hayar Reb Shimon omer b'kadshim. He said 4 principles when it comes to kadshim. This was no easy day in the Beis Medrash. Here are the 4 cases. Case number 1. Hekdesh and b'shas iser habamos. if I was makdish an animal, let's say post churban, v'shachad v'he'ela b'shas iser habamos b'chutz, and then this is like just all based on mikdash time. It's usher. There are not allowed to do bamos, and I shechted in a place where I shouldn't. Harehein ba'aseh v'los aseh b'yesh ben kares, classic shchutei chutz. This is like regular case. That's case one. Case two is actually the case where we reject Rav Kahana, but we're going to learn all four. Hekdesha b'shas heter habamos, v'shachad v'hela b'shas iser habamos. That was our case. What do we see? Harehin b'aseh v'lo sa'aseh v'ein ben kares. So we see over there that even if you were v'he'elah, that's the word he used. Even if you took it out, you would not be chayiv kares. So that Rav Kahana's already rejected. But let's learn the next two cases. Hekdesha b'shas iser habamos, v'shachad v'hela b'chutz b'shas heter habamos. If you were makdish something when it was aser to have a bama, and then you shechted it and brought it out when it was mutter to have a bama, harehin ba'aseh, it's only an iser aseh, ve'ein bahen v'lo saseh, and of course there's no kares, there's only kares on two mitzvos aseh, which is korban pesach and bris milah, nothing else. And the fourth case of Reb Shimon in the Brayos says, hekdeshim b'shas heter abamos v'shachad v'hela b'shas heter abamos, pater miklum. So what did we see from the second case? The second case is Tiyufta to Rav Kahana, Tiyufta, because it was exactly the opposite of what he said. The case that Rav Kahana wanted to start with at the beginning of these two dots, which is a third of the way down, Rav Kahana wanted to say that you are going to be chayiv kares if you take this animal out of the Makam HaMikdash, if it was hekdeshan b'shas heter bamos, and it was removed b'shas iser bamos. He wanted to say chayiv kares. Says the Gemara, Reb Shimon black on white says it's mutter. Rav Kahana must be wrong. Says the Gemara, ve'elu kachem. This is talking about things that are true about Abama Gedola, but not true about Abama Ktana. What halachos were different between the two? When we were allowed to have Abama Gedola versus Abama Ktana, what were the halachic differences? So smicha, that's tichsiv lifnei Hashem v'samach. The word v'samach is actually in the next pasuk, but the Gemara over here says that therefore smicha was only done by Abama Gedola. You'd only put your hands on the animal by Abama Gedola, not by Abama Ktana. Shchitas tzafon, that was only true by Bama Gedola. Tichsiv tzfona, lifnei Hashem, not Bama Ktana language. Lifnei Hashem is Bama Gedola language, where you're before Hashem. Matanos saviv, you have to put blood on all of the corners. So it says the Gemara, tichsiv v'zarak al hamizbech saviv v'chule. What about tnufa? What about moving the animal around? Tichsiv v'hinif hakohen lifnei Hashem. What about hagasha, bringing a korban mincha close to the mizbech? Tichsiv higish al hamizbech. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he argues on this Nakud, and he says, Ein mincha babama. He says there are no mincha by Abama, so it doesn't really apply here. And from here we take a little bit of a jump, and we'll come back to our list in a minute. Amar Rav Sheshes, so Divrei Omer yesh mincha babama. According to those who say you are allowed to bring a mincha on a bama, he'll also agree that yesh ofos babama, that you can bring a bird korban on the bama. But the Divrei Omer, which is Rabbi Yehuda, who we just learned that Ein mincha babama, he would say Ein ofos babama. What's the drasha? Zvachim v'lo menachos, zvachim v'lo ofos. That's how Rabbi Yehuda would learn, is that both of those are learned from the same drush of zvachim, that is not allowed to be brought on a bama. Back to our list. The Kohen, how do we know that a bama gdola requires a Kohen and a bama ktana does not? Techsiv zarak Kohen. How about big day sharis, that by a bama gdola that they have to wear the appropriate begadim because his pasuk says the sharis bakodesh. How do we know that by bama gdola we need the kli sharis? Says the Gemara, because asher sharsu bam bakodesh. How do we know about reach nichoach? Techsiv l'reach nichoach laHashem. That's true over there by a bama gdola only. Mechitza b'damim. This is talking about the chut hasikra, mechitza, that there's a mechitza of the damim, that sometimes blood goes above, sometimes blood goes below. How do you know that applies by bama gedola? Dechsiv hayasa reshes ad chatzia mizbeach. Richutz yadayim. What about washing your hands before bama gedola? Dechsiv uve korvasam al mizbeach your chatzu. All end of our list so far. And now what we're going to do is jump into two possible versions of the din of mechitza b'damim. So that was the one we learned 2 ago, that by a bama gedola, we need to have mechitza b'damim, namely, we need to have a chut hasikra, that we need to have that line that above certain korbanos where the blood was placed, and in some cases it was below. We're about 10 lines from the bottom of Kufiyat Testament Beis, making some good timing. Let's get there. We're almost there. Amar Rami Bar Chama, Lo shanu ela b'kadshe bama ktana v'krivim b'bama ktana. When do we say about the mechitza b'damim? That's only true if it was talking about the kadshe bama ktana and they were sacrificed on a bama ktana. Avo, that's when we would say that there is no need for a what's the language for the mechitza b'damim? Aval b'kadshe bama ktana v'dekarvinu b'bama gdola yesh chitzui. So Rami Bar Chama says the leniency is only in certain cases, but certainly if a bama ktana, if it was supposed to be a bama ktana and you were makriv it on a bama gdola, then yesh chitzui, then we would have to bring it on a mizbech that does have a split of the chut hasikra. Mosiv Rabba, he disagrees. First of the middle width lines, says the Gemara, we have a brisa. This is a brisa we've seen before a number of times. It says the Gemara, chazev shok, that the chest and the thigh, and trumas lachmei toda noagin b'kodshe b'magdola, that they had the halachos of the kodshim of a b'magdola, ve'ein noagin b'kodshe b'maktana, and that would be true even if that b'maktana was then brought on a gdola. So therefore, it can't be like you just said. Rav Kahana wanted to say that if it went from a b'maktana to a b'magdola, then we have to worry about the chut sikra. Over here, the brisa seems to not say that way. So the Gemara says we have to teach the brisa a little bit. The brisa should not say the word kodshe. Ema noagin baba magdola ve'ein noagin baba maktana, without talking about kodshim. We're only talking about non-kodshim things, so therefore it's not a stira to Rav Kahana. So that's version 1. And then Ika de Amre, we're 6 lines from the bottom of the page. Amar Rami Bar Chama, Lo shanu ela b'kadshe ba magdola v'yikrivim b'ba magdola. I only say that you need to have the chut sikra if the animal should have been on the b'magdola and you in fact brought it there. Aval b'kadshe b'maktana afal gav the karvin b'magdola. But if you have a b'maktana, even if it was brought on the b'magdola, which is exactly what Rav Kahana wanted to say, required the chut sikra, says the Gemara ein chitzui. The source that was a question for version 1 should be a proof for version 2. Says the Gemara, what do we see from the brisa that we've seen a couple of times already? Chazav v'shoku trumas lachmei toda noagin b'kadshe b'magdola. So just like we wanted to say that if there was something that was really kache b'maktan and it was brought on a b'magdola, that there is no chut sikra, maybe we have a raya. Says the Gemara, no, we don't. Just like we said before, because that brisa shouldn't really have the word kachim in it. Ema nohagin b'b'magdola without referencing kachim, ve nohagin b'b'maktana without referencing kachim. Therefore, it's not a good proof altogether. The source is just not relevant to what we're talking about because we are talking about kachim being brought on a b'magdola. And all of this is upliga de Rebbe Lazar. The Amar Rebbe Lazar, olas bamas yachid sheichnisa bifnim. Let's say you have a bamas yachid that was brought bifnim into a bama gdola. That was our case. Kal tua mechitzas l'chol davar. He says that once you bring something that was really meant to be a for a bama ktana, and you bring it into the curtain space, into the holy space of the bama gdola, it's transformed now. Now it's no longer bama ktana material. It's just bama gdola material because you entered into a holier space. Now let's ask a question on that. Last line, last few words on the page, on Kufiyat Testament base. Says the Gemara, Bar Reb Zera, Olas bamas yachid, sheichnisa lifnim v'hotzia l'chutz ma'al. Let's say you had an ola for a bamas yachid, you bring it into lifnim, to a bama gdola, and then you take it out. Is that considered halah b'chutz? Mi amrin on kivin da'ayla kalta l'mechitzta. Do we say that once it's brought into the bigger bama, then it's kaltal mechitzah, and then it's just treated like bama gedola. O dilma kaven the hadar. If you bring it out, then you've brought it out. So says the Gemara 3 lines down, and I'll ask you to join me in the Dibur Hamaskil of Rashi, a quarter of the way down. The whole text of this Gemara is mishabesh dahi. The whole thing is messed up, and we're going to follow Rashi exclusively. We're actually going to skip 4 lines in the Gemara and read them right here. Follow with me in the Gemara, in Rashi. Lav Hainu, isn't this exactly the machlokes to Rabba v'Rav Yosef? Keep reading in Rashi with me. Ditnan. Kadshe kadshim sheshachtan bidarom. Kadshe kadshim are supposed to be shechted in the north. What if you shechted them in the south? So, mo'alin behem. V'ibayalahu, the question was raised. Alu mahu sheyirdu. If you took that korban, which was kadshe kadshim that was shechted bidarom, which is the wrong place, and we said there's still me'ila by them, so there still is a din of something kaddish going on there, and you put it up on the mizbeach, ma'u sheyirdu. Rabba amar yerdu, v'Rav Yosef amar im alu lo yerdu. Rabba says you can still take it down. Rav Yosef says, im alu lo yerdu, you can't take it down. Back in the Gemara, we're 7 lines down at the word tibai. I'll give you a moment to find it. Tibai le Rabba, tibai le Rav Yosef. Says the Gemara, no, this is not necessarily the plugta of Rabba Rav Yosef. Let's get everything clear because this was a little bit jumbled. We wanted to know if I bring an olas yachid into a bama gedola space, do we treat it like it's bama gedola or do we treat it like it's bama ktana? The Gemara wants to say perhaps this is like our case of kache kachim sheshachtan bedarm. We have a machlokes Rabba and Rav Yosef. Says the Gemara, no, not a good comparison. Tiboy, do you like how many footnotes? You have a lot of footnotes there in this one? Yeah, this is a lot of restructuring of the Gemara. This daf is very, very, very complicated if you learn it the way that it's written. Rabbah and Rav Yosef are backwards. The Mishnah that's quoted is not correct. That's why we are using Rashi's language here. So what's the problem with that would have been with Rabbah and with Rav Yosef? Tiboy le Rabbah, 7 lines down, 8 lines down. Why would it be a question against Rabbah, who, as Rashi pointed out, held that you can take it down if it went up? Remember, Koche Kachim, that was Nishchat Bedarm, which is the wrong place. You put it on the Mizbeach. Rabbah says you can take it down. Because maybe Ad Kan Lo Ka'amar Rabbah Ela B'Mizbeach. Maybe that's only true by the Mizbeach. De Chazile Mekadesh, De Lo Chazile, De Lo Chazilo Mekadesh. If it's holy enough, it stays up. If not, not. Aval Mechitza. But our case that we were asking about, when you brought an Ola, which was a Yachid, into the Bama Gdola space, maybe Rabbah, you might be comparing apples and oranges. The fact that Rabbah might tell you that the animal can come down doesn't mean that if you bring an Ola into the curtains, that it's still Bama Ketana material. Lav dafka. It could be that he holds that the strength of the mechitza is very powerful, but if you put something on the mizbech that's not shaykh, you can take it down. Could be. Odilma afilu the Rabbi Yosef. We could even say that according to Rabbi Yosef, even Rabbi Yosef, who held that by the korban im alu lo yerdu, maybe he would say differently by the mechitza din. Ad kan lo kamar Rabbi Yosef hasem el dechad makamu. There we're only talking about one place. We're all just having the thing sitting on the mizbech. So what should we do? Aval hacha, in our case, the korban started by a bamas yachid. It's the trei makomos ninhu, and therefore lo odilma lo shna. Why is it 2 places? Because we started with the ola by a bamas yachid, and then we brought it into the bama gdola. Again, apples and oranges. Maybe Rav Yosef would have a totally different din when it comes to that. Says the Gemara. Beautiful question. Teiku, we don't know. And then the Gemara takes it another step further. Milsa de pshitale le Rabba bechad gisa ule Rav Yosef bechad gisa. That which was seemingly pashut to Rabba, that im alu yerdu, that you would take down a korban that was shechted in the south, kache kachim that was shechted in the south. It's pashut to Rabba that you take it down. It's pashut to Rav Yosef that you leave it up. So that's mi boile the Rav Yanai. That was a kasha that Rav Yanai had. That wasn't glat. That wasn't a simple thing. The boy Rav Yanai. Evare olas bamas yachid she'ola la mizbeach gersa change mahu sheyirdu. He asked it as a question. Rabbah thought it was pashut, you take it down. Rav Yosef said it's pashut, you leave it up. Rav Yana is like, I have no idea. I don't know why you guys are so comfortable with this. I'm not comfortable. After all, what was Rav Yana's svara? Heicha de lo mashla v'hen ha'or lo tibaylach. If the fire didn't start burning this thing fully yet, well, then it's not really mizbeach material because it's not consumed yet, and therefore, pasha, you'll take it down. And kiti bailach, the only question is, hecha de mashla bohen haor mai. Rav Yanai says it really depends on whether or not it's caught fire yet. And Rav Yanai holds is that he asks, I should say, if it has caught fire, still would we say yerdu or lo yerdu by kache kachim that were nishchat bedarom? Says the Gemara, teku. Halfway down on Kuf Chaf Amid Aleph. Yep.
You get two rabbis saying Pshita, and the conclusion is taken.
And then Rav Yanai says, but for Rabbah it was clear. Rabbah's psak was definitely this way. The Gemara doesn't know how to paskin. But Rav Yanai is like, what are you guys talking? Why are you comfortable with that? He's like that. It depends on whether or not it's on fire.
The conclusion taker. Like, whoa.
Rabbah was pshita that you take it down. Rav Yosef was pshita that you leave it up. Rav Yanai was completely confused, and everyone agrees that the answer is teku. Yeah. So 3-way machlokes amoraim, and the teku in both cases. Okay, 10 lines before the white lines. Itmar, shchitas laila bebamas yachid. Skip a line. If you have, we're not going to skip a line. We're going to add some text here. Shchitas laila bebamas yachid. Let's look at the side here. According to Girsas Rashi, Rav Amar Kshera, Ushmuel Amar Psula. Rav says that if you do a shchita at night on a bamas yachid, it's mutter. Big chiddush. We don't do korbanos at night unless it's chulin. Chulin, I guess you could check the cow at night. I don't think that's a problem. It's only for halachic purposes of like korbanos. So good. Skip. Now let's go. V'kamiflagi. What is it that Rav and Shmuel are arguing about? That Rav says it's kosher to do shchita at night, and Shmuel says no. They're arguing with Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar, Rami Kroy Ahadade. Rabbi Elazar had two psukim that didn't seem to stem. Dichsi, one pasuk says, talking about the Sefer Shmuel when Shaul gave Musar to people. V'yomer bagadatem, you did something wrong. You're eating an animal after you shechted it without having done zrikas adam. Galu elai hayom even gedola. Bring to me during daytime today, even gedola. We're going to do zrikas adam. So that seems to imply that shechita is done during the day. Uchsi vayomer shol putzu ba'am va'amartem lem hagishu elai ish shor of ish sehu ushchattem bazeh v'achaltem lo sechato l'Hashem le'echol al adam vayagishu kol ha'am shoro b'yado halayla vayishchatu sham. Two psukim. One pasuk from Shmuel seems to tell us that it's supposed to be during the day. The second pasuk is also from Shmuel, just one pasuk later. Not that far. It looks like a stira. So what would Shmuel say? Mar mashani kan b'chulin kan b'kachim. He would say there's a big difference. You're allowed to shecht chulin at night, but kachim you're not allowed to. One pasuk is talking about chulin, one pasuk is about kachim. Umar Rav would say mashani kan b'kache b'magdola, kan b'kache b'maktana. It depends. By kache b'maktana, those you can do at night. By kache b'magdola, those you cannot do at night. Very good. First of the long lines. Itmar olas bamas yachid. Rav Amar aintu and a hefsheh v'nituach. If you have a korban that's brought on a bamas yachid, you do not need to skin the animal and cut it into pieces. Rabbi Yochanan Amar tu and a hefsheh v'nituach. V'kamifla gibed Rabbi Yossi Haglili. The Tanya. Rabbi Yossi Haglili Omer. Ola shekrivi Yisrael b'midbar. An ole of the Jews that was shechted in the midbar. Aintu and a hefsheh v'nituach. They do not need to be skinned. Why? She'en hefsheh v'nituach ela me'ohel moed ve'elach. The only time the din of skinning an animal applied was after the ohel moed and not before. Mar savar me'ohel moed ve'elach loshna b'magdola v'loshna b'maktana. One says that after that time it doesn't matter if it's b'magdola or b'maktana. Umar savar no, but b'magdola in. Before ohel moed, we still had to do the hefsheh v'nituach by b'magdola, but not by b'maktana. Let's see who's right. Tanya kavasa Rabbi Yochanan. We have a brayso like Rabbi Yochanan. Dvarim shebein b'magdola leb'maktana. What are some of the differences between b'magdola and b'maktana? We already saw a bunch of these already. Smicha, b'chulei, rechitza, all the things on the bottom of Kufiyat Testament base. What are some of the differences? Keren, the corners, we needed corners on the Bamagdola. The Kevesh, we needed a ramp. The Yesod, we needed on those two sides, on the western and northern sides, we needed to have a base. The Ribua, it had to be cube-shaped, or really squares, the footprint, Bamagdola. And the Ein Keren, the Yesod, the Kevesh, the Ribua, Bamaktana. They didn't apply by the Bamaktana. Kior v'chano b'bama gdola. These things, the kior and all those preparatory things apply to a bama gdola. The kior v'chano b'bama ktana. Chazav v'shop b'bama gdola. Vein chazav v'shop b'bama ktana. These animals that had to be done a tnufa with, they didn't apply by bama ktana. That's all the differences. Dvarim sheshavsa b'bama gdola lebama ktana. What are the similarities in bama gdola and bama ktana? Well, first of all, shchita b'bama gdola u'viktana. You have to shecht. It's not stam. Hefshe v'nituach big dola viktana. This is an interesting line. We just spoke about the fact that that's not true, but I guess after a certain point, I don't know, it's a little hard to know what the Gemara means. And dam matir mufagil big dola viktana. Blood can be a matir, or you can create pigul by the avoda of the dam, both by gdola and ktana. Mumin uzman big dola viktana. The halachos are the same by both, that mumin apply, and that there is zman, there is an expiration date both for the gdola and the ktana. Last part of the Mishnah, aval nosar behazman vehatame shavin bazel bazeh. Whether or not there are bamos, we have a din of nosar, we have a din of zman, which is expiration, and we have a din of tame, that things can become tame. Tana Rabbana. Minayin latzos zman b'bamaktana kebamagdola. How do we know that zman, that an expiration date, applies both by a small bama and a large one? Skip the parentheses to Amra Torah. After all, we know lon yisaref vayotze yisaref. We know that there's already these halachos. So what's the question? So says the Gemara, Ma yotze kasher b'bama. Well, we might have thought that if you have a bama ktana and you took something out of the bama ktana area, that's not aser. Aflon kasher b'bama. I might have thought that there was no expiration date by bama ktana. So therefore, I thought that's why we needed to teach the halacha. Says the Gemara, V'lav kal v'chomer hu ofos. Isn't it true that there should just be a kal v'chomer from ofos? Turning to the final page of this Masechta, the final turn, Kuf Chaf Amud Beis. What's the Kal V'chomer? Ma ofos she'ein hamum posel bahen, zman posel bahen. Just like birds, where a mum is not posseling the animal, but we still see that there's zman. That expiration date's posel, even a bird. Kache b'maktana she'mum posel bahen, and din she'zman posel bahen. Kal V'chomer. Certainly by b'maktana, where we have a din of mum posel, obviously zman's going to be posel. Good Kal V'chomer. Says the Gemara, not a good kal v'chomer. Malofos shekain ein hazar kosher bahen. It's not true. By birds, you're not allowed to have a zar. The malika can only be done by a kohen. Tomar b'bamaktana shazar kosher ba. They're not comparable. By a bamaktana, anyone can do a bamaktana. You don't have to be a Kohen for that. We already learned that on the bottom of Kufid Testament Bays that the din of a Kohen only applies by bamagdola. So says the Gemara, lo yehei zman. Perhaps we should therefore say that lo yehei zman pasul, but that maybe by bamaktana that expiration dates don't apply. Says the Gemara, Tamulomar vizos toras zevach hashlamim lasos zman bamaktana kezman bamagadola. That is what we learned from this pasuk of vizos toras zevach hashlamim, that zman, the expiration date of a bamaktana and a bamagdola are the same, and that expiration dates apply. You might have thought they didn't. Comes along the pasuk to teach us that yes, they do. Hadran alach paraschatas uslika la Maseches Zevachim Baruch Hashem. Mazel tov to those of you who finished, because I'm not one of them, but I have to catch up on like 20 blot, and Reb David's going to give the siyum. You want to do it from your seat? Oh, we need some Jews. I got that. 2 Jews. Tell them that they can have food. What? Yeah.
We printed 3 sheets last night. We finished in a second, and I was like, I print 3 of
them. I literally thought I was a whole almond further. Just in my head, I'm like, why did I print the 3rd sheet? I even said that. I'm like, why did I print the 3rd?
So funny.
So I woke up this morning, I looked at my Gemara, I'm like, oh my God. It didn't even make, I know it was like totally just like
we're going to go up, and I went to Kofi Haslam Bays, and I was like, right there, call right when you could have stopped.
That's right. That's how I should have started.
Yeah.
I actually marked in my Gemara where I was supposed to stop. It was like a quadruple error on my part. It's just
so amazing.
We humans do funny things sometimes. Okay, see if anybody's on.